Everyone, yes, I'm so excited to have all you guys here, especially with as many new hands that came up. Margaret really had it when she talked about the tribe. It's about that resonant community and people that believe what you believe, and how many people had a really cool conversation with someone where they're like, that person's up to big stuff, that's cool stuff. Show hands. See, that was me 5 years ago. I showed up at my first national conference here in the city, and all of a sudden it was like, these people believe what I believe. They're about what I'm about. I don't have to go bring this message to the world by myself. I can just plug into a community. And see, that was what got me so excited about the movement. And Tuesday next week, in Alexander, I'll be at my 5th National Conscious Capitalism in Chicago. And we wanted to bring an opportunity to get closer to the fire, to be part of the tribe in different ways. And so one of the ways that you can do that is become a core member, and core members in the group. And that's when somebody just says, hey, I want to just declare myself as part of the community, part of the tribe. And along with that, it's basically $120 a year, so $10 a month. You get to share the love and put some dough towards our movement to help doing cool events like this. You also get discounts off as many tickets as you like to bring people in the community and kind of plug them in. And we're working on some extra cool things like putting together a membership directory so that you can kind of declare yourself and share your services now coming up in the coming months. There's also sponsorship opportunity. So that's really for organizations that just really align with the values of conscious capitalism. Let's say that's me. And there's an opportunity for that brand alignment, for that co-marketing. One of the things you get to do is you get to use the Conscious Capitalism Bay Area logo in your promotional materials, on your website, and things like that, to really declare that alignment with the brand. The other thing you can do is utilize our social network platforms. And there's a whole, like 2 handfuls of guest tickets every year. So lots of cool things around sponsorship, and if that's a conversation that intrigues you for your organization, we'd love to have that chat, find out how we can add value to you and your organization through just being in that dialogue. And Janet is part of our committee team for membership sponsorship. Where are you, Janet? There you are. Thank you, Janet. So you can talk to me, Janet, any of the board members if you have any questions. And there's also some flyers with the details of sponsorship, membership. And then we did a third cool option, which is kind of a build your own. Maybe you're a young entrepreneur, you're like, you know, I just want to sponsor this event because I really resonate with the message. It's about conscious culture. I'm a conscious culture consultant. And maybe you just want to do that. Or maybe you're a brewer that focuses on conscious business and you're like, I want to donate the beer. We'll figure out something. We'll dance with it. We'll figure out something cool. So I'm grateful to be able to share that opportunity, to be able to plug in and be part of the community. So honored to have you guys here and to hear about your culture shift and the big transformation that you guys have made and where you are on the journey. So I'm going to give this back to Anna. She's going to take us to the rest of the evening. And again, thanks so much for being here and for who you are and have you even be interested in the first place. Appreciate it.
So I'm going to clean up a couple of things that were left out. We're not going to have a bathroom break, was one of the announcements to put out there. So do feel free to... are the doors locked with that table? This is the Hotel California. So feel free to leave in the middle and take care of yourself. There were 2 other announcements, and for the life of me, because they were not mine, I'm struggling.
Sure. The first one is everybody could please check their cell phones so that they don't ring.
I'd love to take the third one, though. The third one was, Ben reminded me that if you wanted to tweet, to go ahead and do that. And that is like, okay, I'm saying that because it's a stretch for me to say, if you want to tweet, go and do that. So I felt like, as the marketing person, Ben, I'm taking ownership of that statement, so there you have it. Right, so today, over the last couple of years, we've had a lot of feedback saying, what are you interested in? What is going to be valuable for you? And one of the things that I know and I have heard is it's hearing from real people. And so, by the way, these are 6 real people.
They are.
So we'll talk a little bit about more of who these real people are. So that was one thing. The other thing is, it's really about how. How do you get started? So for some organizations, they're further down the journey. And And sometimes it's so hard to kind of connect to say, oh, well, they're in this place 10 years down the road. I want to just start. So the reason why we selected Wikia is not only that they are fabulous real people, but they've been on the journey as an organization for about 2 years. So it felt like a perfect organization to get a bunch of diverse perspectives. Now I'm saying diversity of opinion because obviously we are looking at all sorts of diversity, but I can assure you they've got some radically diverse opinions within their group. And that's really where we started from. Just had a quick look there back and met my eye with Jonathan at the back. And one of the things that I want to say before we launch into the whole evening is we are in a law office. Now we've had question marks about that in the past, like, okay, conscious capitalism, okay, law office, what does this mean? And I really want to thank Hanson and Bridget because they have been a solid supporter from day one. Jonathan was part of some of the groundbreaking legal work to create B corporations, benefit corporations. And so this law firm have done some fabulous things in the conscious leadership front as well as in the legal front as well. So it's just kind of a quick shout out because we have had questions about that, and that is item number 4 ticked off of my list. So back to the actual agenda. I've got our 6 people who are, I can see you just on the starting blocks there, ready to answer a bunch of questions. Margaret had said, hold your questions to the end. So we have got a whole bunch of questions. However, if there is something that you really want to get out there, I like to make sure that we do have an opportunity to ask your questions. So at some point, I'll be very cognitive of when I see you kind of getting antsy and wanting to ask yours, we'll switch over to the audience. Just on a couple of logistical fronts, we've chosen to have a large panel, so you do have all sorts of opinions. Everyone won't answer each question. We'll more likely get a couple of responses from each person. And then if you're really, really excited about it, we'll go to whoever's grabbing the microphone in front of them and wanting to speak. As far as the introductions, I do want everyone to get a chance to put their name out in the room, share what your role is, so how you are showing up at Wikia. And Anne, as you're the first, I'll get you to share a little bit about Wikia, because I love putting you on the spot, and I will only do that this once. That is a lie. I just want to call that out right here and now. So basically, share your name, share what role you're showing up in. And so it's not just a name, role, answer. You can answer one of 2 questions, and this is because I'm going to go to all of you on this particular round. One is you could answer what you think conscious leadership is, because that's what we're talking about here. And let's go ahead and see what the panel think about that. And if that's been answered satisfactorily, you could answer how you got introduced to this work. Like what happened, where did your commitment begin? As long as it already has begun. So we won't accept that as a given. So you can go either direction on answering either one of those questions, but I'm going to let you, Anne, tee it off if you're good with that.
So that was 3.
No, you've got 3 parts. Because I know that you are brilliant at tracking all of that. Everyone else has 2.
Notice we have buzzers. Are we supposed to like buzz? I don't particularly. If you guys can hear me, I'll go with that. So Wikia's Home to the Fandom is the home of fandom on the web. For me, it is this incredibly beautiful place where people all over the world come together and create spaces to highlight things they are passionate about. We literally cover everything you can think of, and one of the things I love about working at Wikia is being able to sort of to test the platform and say, can I answer this weird, obscure pop culture question? And the answer is almost always yes, which is what I love about it. So now the other questions.
So now it was your name, your role,
okay,
and then what you think conscious leadership is.
Okay, I'm Anna Watson. I'm the head of HR at Wikia. I've been there for about 4 years, almost 4 years today. And for me, conscious leadership was about, I didn't actually know I was doing it at the time, I'll be totally honest. And what it became for me was about this sort of way to think about growth of an organization in a much more transparent and aware way. I think a lot of times, especially for me in my role and where I came from, it was sort of this like hidden thing that nobody wanted to talk about, like, oh, you want a development plan, you know. It was sort of like a thing that was just, you know, not really talked about, versus the level of you really raise the level of your organization when you're willing to have those conversations. Like, this is my development plan, this is the path I'm on, this is what I'm working on. This is what makes me human, it's what makes me, it's what makes me a great leader, is my ability to be transparent about that. So that's what really has brought me to it as we start doing it. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Amber, do you want to jump in?
Green and one. Hi, my name is Amber Moriwu. I'm the Director of Product Operations at Wikia. What that means is I help the trains run on time. That's the simplest version. And then conscious leadership. I got involved in the program because I was invited to attend a 4-day seminar about it. And it sounded interesting, so I said yes. And I got a lot from that experience. To me, it's about being conscious that we can continue to improve ourselves, and that there are techniques and ways of dealing with situations that you can learn and apply and can become natural over time, but may not be things that they taught you in school. You teach this stuff in school. So that's my definition, my journey on conscious leadership. Learning new techniques and skills that can help, you know, myself and the community better.
Hi, I'm Rex Anderson. I'm Director of Revenue Strategy. And I'm going to answer the question how I got involved with this. So it was a little bit of a bait and switch. Well, maybe not, but so it was actually, I signed up for a course or a program on leadership. And so to me, that was maybe how to schedule meetings, how to be a dynamic person, how to motivate people. But what it boiled down to is just a mindfulness, being aware of how you interact with people, what the rules are, or what the expectations should be. And so I think that's even more valuable because it's not only just for leadership, but it's also for everybody that is within the organization. So that's how I got involved.
Thanks, Rex.
Hi, my name is John Kuhner. I'm a VP of Engineering at Wikia. And I got involved in the same way Rex did, which is I was invited to a training course. And it was really interesting because it was kind of a very eye-opening intersection of leadership techniques and sort of very conscious or concrete tools I could use in my day-to-day work, making agreements with some clues to how to kind of be your more authentic self and how to be conscious and kind of mix the day-to-day work world of business with the internal world of presence and awareness. So I thought it was very interesting.
Thanks, I'm Jen Burton, and I head up Wikia's community organization. I've been involved with this group, I guess, since the beginning. Was part of we call ourselves the Gaining Pay group at Wikia. We did a few days of intense workshop around these topics, and I think for me, similar to John and actually Rex, you know, helps us bring our whole selves to the table, but provides us with the tools to maneuver through what were conversations that were fraught with danger. And sometimes they still are, but now the organization is building a vocabulary and building a set of norms that allow us to move through difficult decision-making, personality conflicts, all of the things that when you get an organization of 300 plus people together can start to distract us from our end goal. And I think think that's some of the ways that these tenets of conscious capitalism and conscious leadership have allowed us to grow as an organization much quicker than we would have been capable of before.
I'm going to hold my mic. But otherwise, I'll be doing it down and to push into you. I'm William Schulz. Everybody calls me Waz, which are my initials. So feel free to call me that as well. I run business development for Wikia. Not sales, but the technology, inbound, outbound licensing, content licensing, stuff like that. I was also part of the guinea pig group. I was the brown and white little furry one that everybody likes it. Wonderworks came in, and we didn't really know what to expect, but a lot of us trust Anne, and she said, "This is a good thing. Think about it." The emphasis of the word is conscious. I mean, you sit in a room with a group of people that you work with, cross-divisional, cross-functional people. I mean, even to utter that word, like, I'm going to be conscious, I'm going to be present in this moment, I'm going to listen to the words that you have to say. Just to start out, especially if you take a group of executives and you just sit in the room and go, say that word, conscious, and look at the other person across the room. It really level sets a group. And then the two words, leadership and culture. Again, culture is actually, I think, the more powerful of the word. And as we were working this program through the rest of the organization, is to use the two words in combination. And I think they're just incredibly powerful words. You're going to hear us use a lot of other words that are part of this program that we'll probably have to explain because they're key words that sets up this framework. As what Jen said, it's a vocabulary, and it's a specialized vocabulary, but it's one that we have all felt as you start to use these words and these key phrases and these intentions with the same intent. We believe that the organization starts to revolve around central thought processes, and then also what's been expressed here, keep us focused on what matters, keep us focused on our goals and our objectives, but creating a dialogue that all of us understand from each other. So that's what it means to be conscious.
Right. And just to set up a context, some of you might already know that 50 of the organization have been through the program over a series of 5 or 6 maybe different groups over the last couple of years, and so they're at that stage. And to me, culture is when the entire organization starts to really embody something, and so I totally agree, culture is, I think, the more powerful word, meaning because that's really when you're starting to live and breathe something organically and naturally, is the way I see it. Whereas when you're at 50, you've made some great inroads because you've got 6 people willing to sit in chairs, but it's then you kind of go to that next stage, and obviously we can talk about that later. What I wanted to ask you is, so you talked about awareness, being really that root part of consciousness, and when I think about awareness in action, so your actions are following whatever awareness, instead of, oh yes, I'm aware of that and I'm going to ignore it, would be my thought, that's the goal. Now, I think if you can kind of make it more maybe practical, of a couple of examples of some of the practices that any of you might want to share, like something that is now a practice that you have as a result of going through this. And as was said, clarify one point, whoever says the word that you don't understand, so just in case a word is used, I'm not going to be the monitor on that, but I'd love you to be. So this now is the practice for you to be brave enough to say, actually, could you say how the definition of how you see that word or what that means? So it doesn't mean that you don't know what it is, but you might need clarification about how they are using it. So would you be willing to agree? And the better way to ask that is there anyone not willing to agree to that? My 10-second pause to see if I... Yeah, because silence equals consent. That is one of our norms. So, yeah, appreciate that. So thank you, appreciate it. And so a practice, any one practice that any of you individually, who wants to take that one? Yeah.
So I'm going to define the concept first. 100% responsibility. So if you have two people in a situation, you both bring your own 100% to that situation, hopefully. Now somebody who's not trying, might bring their 50%, but if I bring my 100%, all of my energy and power and will to make something good in the situation, I can't also take on part of their 100%. I can only bring my 100% to the table. That other person also has to bring all of their side to the table. Does that sort of make sense? So this was a really interesting learning for myself. I'm on, I use the phrase, I'm a keener. I'm somebody who's enthusiastic and really wants to do well and wants to make sure everything goes smoothly. I organize and facilitate a lot of different meetings and so on across the organization. And so sometimes I've been in a situation where I've set up like a one-day offsite and I've been doing the agenda and getting buy-in and so on. And then after having learned this concept, I realized when I was setting up this particular offsite, I was like, I felt like the whole success of this offsite depended on me. It was all me. And I was like, you know what, actually it's not. I need to bring my 100%. I need to do everything that I can in my power to make it a success. But unless all those other people bring their 100% as well, it won't be a success, and that won't be my fault. I can only control my piece of that, and I can only bring my piece to it. So it helped me realign my expectations of what I could do in that situation, and help me relax a little bit, I guess.
Great, love it. Because ultimately, how can we reduce stress? You know, everyone wants that key. Well, that particular practice of, is this my 100% or is this my 300 or 3,000%? Yeah, so anyone else? Is there another practice that anyone would like to share? Yeah, Jen.
I'll go and then I'll hand it over to John. One of the things that's been actually really freeing for me is the practice of alignment and agreement. I sit on the executive team at Wikia, so we get together weekly and we have to make sometimes decisions that are really hard to make, or we're gonna, you know, and we may not all 100% of us sitting in that room be all in agreement that that is the right decision to take. What do we do? What happens in that situation? You're the leaders of the company, and you've got a room full of 10 people, and maybe there are some dissenters, and how do we handle that? Does that mean that we don't move forward with an idea? So having a sense of, I may disagree with this idea, but I'm in alignment with the company, and I'm going to move forward with this, is really freeing for me, because I can say and be heard. I'm not in agreement with this expectation. It's not for me. But yes, I will do the work to get there because I'm a part of this team and I want Wikia to be successful. Rather than having to be like, I disagree and I'm going to sit back and fold my arms until everyone agrees with my disagreement. We were there.
Well, we also had the, I'll go ahead and say yes to this, but I'm just going to wait for it to fail.
Oh yeah, there is that too.
Which is a less than 100% responsibility, right? So you know that you do your work.
And I get to say,
you've committed to
I
it.
totally don't agree, but I'm good. I'm in. My team's going to do this. We're on board. And it's a strange thing to have some freedom in that, that it's okay for us to not all agree too, and that is okay. We're sitting in a room with 10 executives. We all have different levels of experience. We're all very opinionated and good at what we do, and it's okay that we don't always agree. It's been really freeing.
And I guess kind of echoing on that, one of the things I found really helpful is kind of a specific methodology around making agreements. I'm one of those people who I love to live in the world of possibilities, and then when it actually gets down to something more concrete, that's sometimes challenging for me. So kind of having like a very concrete set of things that previously I would have thought would be implicit, actually kind of make much more explicit. Like who is actually making this agreement? Who needs to be informed? How long does this take? How do we change it? What are the next, kind of very, making it concrete, I guess, is what I would say there. So that's been very helpful.
And so we kind of got cultural leadership definition, we've got some practices. To me, when you start practicing in the real people in the real world, I think the interesting piece is, what are some of the experiences that you have? Like, what are some of the uh-ohs, or what are some of the yays, you know, what are some of the, and it could be an individual experience or an experience with another person. So maybe thinking about some of those examples of when you've taken your newfound skills on the road, what are some of the experiences you've had? Who wants that one?
So I have a partner, a development partner that in our organization is not here because he's in Poland, and he and I have these very, these very intense disagreements, and they follow a pattern, right? And it wasn't until we started to kind of work on this consciously that we realized they followed the pattern, and as we've gone through this together, kind of on this journey together of working on our relationship, we still have the same disagreements. We actually, we have the exact same argument. The difference for us is that we have it in about 5 minutes now. And we're very aware of it. So like, it starts and I'm like, okay, you're commanding. He's like, okay, you're defensive. And I'm like, okay, great. Now, what's our answer? What's our next step? And we move on. And it's incredible how like that would have taken 2 weeks and how it would have resolved by us getting to work with it and kind of moving on. And not wanting, if there's some amount of it you take with you and you carry that with you to the next conversation, like, oh, it's going to be another, and so for me, that was a real, success for me, kind of personal, professionally. It's kind of not so much. There are other ones that are more for the organization, kind of seeing people resolve their relationships and learn to take these tools and apply them is I find it incredibly joyful. But for me personally, that was a big one, is to realize that, oh, we've just learned how to do this so much better, and recognize and be conscious of what we're doing. And it's really helped us sort of take things to a much more effective and efficient place.
Yeah, I have to, I didn't, obviously didn't know what we were going to share, but I really wanted to fly Anjay out for this.
I do too.
Because one of the things is when you've got radically different personalities, that's, I think, where the exciting stuff happens, because when you literally are beating your head up against a wall, and so a shout out to Anjay. Yeah, really appreciate you for testing Anne that way. I did need to mention that I know it's pretty hot in here. There isn't actually any way to change that, so if you would like to just go, just be with that heat, and then back over to you guys. Anyone else that would like to? Yeah, it was.
So I want to introduce a practice that wasn't mentioned before, because it's a setup to what works and actually what works. So one of the practices we learned what is affectionately called a withhold, and it really, the setup is actually work and in personal life. We're around people that just do something that pisses you off, right? I mean, somebody says something, the way they say it, the time that they say it. I mean, our lives are filled, exactly. Our lives are filled with a lot of these sort of quotes and pros. And when stress is introduced, what usually happens, unless you have a practice and unless you practice that practice, is you withhold it, right? Somebody pisses you off, you don't say anything, you let it go, but the fact is you can't let it go. You start to think about it at night. You think about it the next morning when you wake up, and you see that person walking in the hall, and all of a sudden you're not looking them in the eyes because you're thinking about that thing that you experienced the day before. So part of the practice is you're allowed to call somebody on a withhold, and again we learned and worked and performed our practice where at the right time you can take somebody aside and you go, I got to withhold, and the other person realizes, like, okay, well, so that's simply a keyword for I obviously ticked you off, or I did something that you're struggling with. But their behavior is to let you express that withhold. And if they're 100% engaged, and if they're there for you, they will let you voice your withhold. And again, it moderates even the person who has the withhold. You're not being emotional, you're not being driving, you're not being antagonistic, you're not reflecting anger back, you're just allowed to explain that thing that that other person did that bothered you. And I can honestly say, I can honestly say I've had a lot of withholds since with a lot of different people, including my boss and a lot of my peers, and with possible exception of a handful of interactions, they've all been beneficial. I mean, certainly in comparing what is typical, which is that seething, that under the skin, that thing that lets you, where you just ride with it, being able to express the withhold, have that other person sit back, and sometimes they end up with their own withhold, and that causes a feedback loop, but again, it's moderated in a way that's much better than what I've always found typically happens in a work environment.
I'll say on that real quick, just to follow, was it's not easy to sit down and hear someone share a withhold about you. It's not easy, and not everyone has the same level of skill. And you know, I've been the recipient of this conversation from someone who didn't have really a lot of skill at this, and it was not, and I got real defensive real quick. These are new skills we're trying to learn, and so as you pick up something new you don't know how to do, it takes a lot of practice, and some people are, you know, practice by doing, and so there might be some painful failures. I've been on both sides of painful failure withhold sharing sessions.
You also had some really successful.
I've had some great success with it, by far.
Who was that hero? All right, Rex,
We have a hand up.
oh, sorry, and then I'll go to Rex.
So my question for that is, is this a criticism that's hard to handle, or is it a method of communication that can't be handled, or you're not understanding, or you're both not 100% engaged?
Yes. I don't think of withhold, I don't use the word withhold when I'm thinking internally, I think of them as resentments. And if you've heard the phrase about resentments, which is resentment is drinking poison and hoping someone else dies, that's what withholds are to me. So when I'm in that place with someone, I know that I need to sit down and it's taking responsibility for my part in it. It's not, oh, I'm going to give time to hear a withhold and then like, you stepped on my shoes today and that really sucked. That's not how these go. It is generally taking responsibility. It might go something like, I'm telling myself a story that when you rolled your eyes in the meeting yesterday when I was talking, it meant that you didn't respect me. And that means that I can't be successful here. That might be how a withhold goes, and that person might say, thank you for sharing that. They don't have to do anything else. They don't have to defend themselves. They don't have to engage with you in your resentment. Thank you. Moving on.
A lot of times what prevents you from doing that is knowing that, oh, if I say this thing out loud, we're going to have this big, long conversation, and so I'll just swallow it because it's easier. And to really get that sort of, I wouldn't call it efficient yet, but like that, to actually have a way to process that, it is incredibly valuable. Someone in one of the sessions said relationship magic, which for me it has felt like the closest thing I've ever seen to that.
So I was just going to add that for those of us who have taken this training, we have a common set of language, common terms that we can all use to communicate. So if I'm to approach somebody who's taken this course and said, I have a withhold, there's an expectation they understand what I'm doing, they understand that there's something that I'm upset about, that I want to communicate to them, and so they then understand what the process is, that it's just part of us working together, and this will happen from time to time, and the expectations are set. So it makes the whole process easier and allows us, I think, just to resolve things much more quickly.
So my thought, one of the questions that comes up again and again when I'm speaking to clients is, how do we measure success? And generally speaking, it is the question before you start working with them. So what I want to do is I want to throw out to the table, how do you measure success as it relates to conscious leadership?
I can leave last.
I think Anne's story earlier already shows success, the fact that you and Andre are able to process challenges much faster. So it's making working relationships more efficient and more successful in a shorter time period. Like, I don't know that we have numbers, or I don't know. So it's still, there's definite. Okay, maybe they're counting the arguments. I don't know. But I don't think there's hard numbers that we can pull up to say on this spreadsheet. But it is just that improvement of those working relationships and more confidence to be able to move forward faster in challenging situations. Challenging situations are going to continue to happen. It's how quickly you're able to handle it and move forward.
I would also say, again, not a metric for success, but one example that I think is possible now that wouldn't have been possible before is withholds or for us, we're part of a bigger training on how to give and receive feedback, similar to nonviolent communication or kind of I statements or things like that. And having a shared vocabulary for that allowed me to recognize what I thought were communication problems within one of my teams, and actually realize that, or have a theory that it was sort of caused by them not being really able to talk to each other. And then I went, man, I was like, oh, I need to do this leadership training tomorrow because somebody's going back to Poland and blah, blah, blah. And then so we sort of scrambled and actually did like an afternoon session. And we had those tools, and I don't know, directly as a result, but more than coincidentally, the relationships within that team improved after that.
Again, just so no one thinks that there's one guy in Poland that we all resent. We actually have a pretty large engineering office in Poland. So you might hear
65 people.
We've got Poland, Germany, UK, Tokyo, SF, LA, all over the place. So there's not one poor guy. There's a bunch of them.
So to me, a very vivid example of a success is the word agreement. And it's, getting back to sort of the executive staff, we before we've taken the training, I would describe the typical staff meeting as, 20%, 25% productive output, about 30-35% screaming and yelling. Okay, maybe not quite that good. It wasn't screaming and yelling, but there's a lot of negative, unproductive discourse. But the one thing you could be guaranteed of is that everybody would leave that meeting and absolutely everybody would think that we've just agreed on something completely different. You had a whole bunch of people like, I know we just agreed to do X and no, it was Y. And then of course, one day goes by, 3 days, you come back the next meeting, the next week, and nobody had any sense of understanding what we'd agreed to. So part of this, part of being conscious, is understanding that when you make an agreement, that it's a real word and it means something. And definitionally, to agree on something as a group is powerful. We did something super simple that has been very successful. We keep meeting. We have our agenda in a Google Doc that we manage the meeting to, and we put the word agreement and a colon at the top of each weekly meeting agenda, and when we agree on something, it gets written there. And something that simple has been incredible. It's definitely proven to be successful and has helped us out. Just focusing on that word and documenting it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So at this point, some great stories. I think there's some how. So we don't want to stay theoretical. We want to really be in the how. What are the actual things? But the most fun part. What would be some of the failures? Like what didn't work? So you can think about it as fabulous failures, or it could be this was the most challenging and it didn't have all pretty bows at the end of it. So whatever fits into that category.
You have to define the triangle. We have not gotten to the triangle yet. Yeah, I think.
Okay,
that's on you. I think the little triangle.
You can do it.
Yeah, well, I like it.
You got a car. She's got a car.
Who wants to go with that one?
All right, I'll take this one. This is my favorite.
Oh, okay, we should.
So this, go ahead, you do it.
No, I'm happy to jump this now. There you go, yeah. Oh, that's a no. Oh, me! What am I going to do now? She's actually making me do something. Oh, okay. So,
The villain blames themselves and others. It's a persona. This is my favorite persona. So this is on the triangle of the three that we've got here: hero, villain, and victim. Of these sort of modes of behavior that we all sort of carry around all the time without really being conscious of them. I love villain because, and in my role as HR, right, it's all their fault. I'm just here to bear witness to it and try to help it where I can, but really it's just up to them. I'm Catbird, exactly. So this was a big thing for me, was to realize, even in the first time we did this training, I realized I was kind of sitting in the corner like, what are you guys going to do? Right? And like not participating. Actually, it wasn't until the second time I did this that I was like, oh, right, I'm part of this. Part of it.
So that's the 100% concept. Hero is another part of the triangle. Thank you. So hero is another part of the triangle, another place to be on the triangle. Hero seems temporary relief. So if you're in a situation that's really tense, things going really badly, the hero is that person who just wants to get beyond that and make things feel comfortable. But you can overdo it. It's back to you. So let's see. You know you're in a hero position if you see others as less capable and are acting with expectations of reward. The hero plays out its role by applying the solution to the problem in order to avoid feelings of discomfort. So it's taking on more of it than you really need to.
I want to hop in on that because this is capitalism, right? Isn't this like, this is like you go to work and you're supposed to work really hard and pick up all the pieces that everyone else dropped, and that's how you're going to get to the end line, and that's how we're going to be successful and get really rich.
Oh, I thought that was good.
But this idea that if like the utility infielder who can do a little bit of everything and really make sure everything happens, and that's 110%. And as Amber said at the top, we can't take more than 100% responsibility for something. We just can't. And heroes really, to me, I think is one of the things that I think of when I think of business and how to get ahead in business.
Yeah.
You do whatever it takes.
I think the heroes were there were a lot of there's a lot of hero in traditional manager, right? There's a lot of training that says if someone on your team comes to you and says, oh, I'm struggling with this thing, I will take care of that for you. Right, like that more than 100% behavior is really strongly embedded and rewarded in a lot of ways.
Go.
What do you got?
So I have victim. So victim is basically coming from a place of powerlessness, feeling like you're overworked, people don't understand you, when in fact that's not a productive place from which to come. It says here they're seeking out help, they're in pain and suffering, people who want to be rescued, so it's come to save me, come to do my work for me, or show me how to do it, help me get it done. Overwhelming problems, so
basically that's the Cartman triangle. Some of you might be aware of it. Hero, victim, villain, you might use other terms, prosecutor, etc. Persecutor, should I say? Prosecutor. By the way, I did think this was a little bit like prosecutor here, right? That was like, so Stephen Cartman's done some great work on that. The Hendricks Institute has done some brilliant work on that. Many do this work, and so this is one of the modules that we would do. But who has the presence card over there? Okay, over to you, John.
So presence is if you can if you can recognize you're in one of these states in the triangle and take a deep breath, take a walk, clear your mind, then ideally you can get back into a state of presence that you can make good decisions, live a good life, be conscious.
So somebody asked for this to be said in relationship to a failure. I just want to double check.
No, I think the triangle's important because to me the most epic failures are when presence is unattainable and you get this vortex. So like you're on the triangle and any one of these, whether you're playing the hero or the villain or the victim, it's a vortex. And the epic failures are when that vortex opens up and just sucks you down into it, and there is no presence. You are in the black hole of lack of presence. Okay, and that to me is a setup for failure.
And so, is there anyone, John, are you biting at the jump there?
Yeah,
Yep,
I'll
off you go.
jump in. And was witness to one of my spectacular failures, which I think I was sort of cycling in all three of these. Typically, one of the things that I really liked, one of the things I liked the most in this training was feedback, and I like giving feedback, I like getting feedback, but I just had this one employee that we were just completely stuck, and it was, I could never get into a state of presence. I was sort of always on the triangle, so that it didn't work.
I was going to say that there was, in the first version, can I tell the story?
Yeah.
So the first version was sort of a beta version.
And by the way, you only need to say first version for me to know exactly what you're talking about.
One of the learnings we tried with that group was about body awareness and sort of you're being aware of yourself physically. And we were going through sort of a body map, and we got to, and talking about different feelings, and we got to sexual feelings, and the air went out of the room, and it was like, I've never experienced a more awkward moment in my life. What were you saying?
This is a group of people who could barely be in a room together, let alone consider getting naked together.
It was really kind of a bonding moment in some ways, but it was like, okay, no, stop, that won't work. And so we pared that down to something that's more manageable for our crowd. And really that was a lesson about like, I was thrilled with how much of the material resonated. So to have like only one little piece of it be weird or awkward for anyone, myself included, was yes, I could maybe call that a little bit of a failure, although it's more of just a really funny moment in the whole process. But really the fact that the other 90% of it really struck a chord with us and stayed with us, and we've been evolving and iterating on it for the last couple of years, is not familiar. See what I did there?
I think that actually somebody called out the statement. So all of these practices are how we at Wonderwork see conscious leadership and conscious culture. So the practices, I feel, are somewhat universal and time-tested, and some of it's common sense, but some of it, with all practices, it's about having a specific process so that it's repeatable, and so that you can go to a myriad of different personalities, a myriad of different cultures, and be able to give them a process, and everyone can follow a similar process so that they can start embodying the practices. So just to clarify, yes, this all aligns with conscious capitalism, but it's not saying technically, conscious capitalism is an enormous umbrella that is about all practices that relate to conscious leadership and conscious culture, as well as higher purpose and stakeholder orientation. But that was just a clarification point, just in case anyone needed that. So what I'm thinking is, just as I'm going to go out to the audience and get questions, but is there anything that any of you feel like you want to share before I go in that direction, just making sure that we're not going to be in the shakes mode of withhold. I'm joking. You're good? Yeah, so what questions do we have from the audience? And I'm happy to run the mic if needed, and yeah.
How has this impacted your top leadership, particularly in their embodiment or non-embodiment of the culture, being the leaders of the culture?
Definite, obvious impact, and absolutely for the better. And I think in a lot of ways, again, Anne brought this to the senior group and suggested that we do it. And I think, to our credit, we clearly knew that we had a degree of dysfunction going on that we needed to address. So it was just simply taking that first step. So it had a material impact, and it still does. It really does.
Does that answer the question?
not been any questions.
Yeah, okay, great. You got it, I'm going to go back right and then I'll flip over into the middle there. You're a laughed man.
I don't think I need light.
Okay.
So you talked about meetings are generally 25% productive, and then you guys started this process. Give me some real examples of productivity gains or other real hard improvements that have helped Wikia compete, outperform what it used to do, whether it's increased creativity, reduced friction, and faster time to hitting goals, or better performance, all of that. Instead of like, we were happier, everybody can communicate better, which is a real result.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. But I'd like to, what are the actual traditional performance metrics gains?
Also in there, actually.
Yeah.
Happiness matters. Happiness
Yes, I
brings
agree.
performance. So even if all of this work only meant that we left meetings happier, we're in much better shape than in a situation where our groups are spiraling into dysfunction. And the dysfunction was coming out from the top. And we saw that and recognized that, and we invested the bottom line of the company, literally, like we spent money to make this happen. We did it more than just the senior team, as I think has been alluded to. We're rolling this out in groups with the goal of getting everyone who works at Wikia through this program. How has it helped us get to things faster? As was mentioned multiple times, we have a tool now to help us come to agreements in meetings. We literally didn't have that before, and so as Was said, we would leave our senior staff meeting and 3 or 4 people might have different ideas of what those agreements or decisions were, and nothing was getting done. And our boss, the CEO, there was just smoke just trickling out of his ears most of the time. And he was part of this too. We're all in this together, and I think this has given us, there's no excuses now in many respects. Those of us who have been through this training, who have now been exposed to the idea of the triangle and that dance, Anne's called me out. I've been like, really just attached to my anger. And she'll be like, So I have to go work on that. So that's, I guess, some examples from my side.
I think, so I've got kind of 3 really concrete ones. So the first one was the first time we did this, with the sort of the first version. We did an activity where we decided how we were going to make a decision. And it took us a half an hour. Not to make a decision, to decide how we were going to make a decision. We hadn't even started on the decision. And so that you take a half an hour times everybody's time, right? And we haven't even gotten to the meeting part, right? Getting that down to we know how to make decisions. We recognize what we're doing, we're explicit about it, we make our agreements. I can't remember that 30% of yelling and screaming. A lot of that was, well, we decided this last week. No, we didn't. We decided something else completely different. I can't remember the last time we've done that because we make our agreements explicitly now. And that's really trickled down to the organization. I think one other really big success that I think of as a success, we had a sort of a legacy tool that we were very attached to, right? This is the example. We're very attached to this tool for a number of reasons. And every time we kind of broach the subject of replacing it with a better, newer tool, everything got real spicy really fast. And so we always, I think there was a kind of fear to approach this, but we got to the point where we had to make this decision. We no longer had the ability to sort of avoid making that decision. And Amber and another member of the team who've been through the program ran this process through this sort of explicit decision-making and agreement process, and it was amazing. This was not something we would have been capable of without people being resentful and bitter and angry about it. Instead, it was just as smooth as silk. It was absolutely stunning from where I sat, kind of on as a little bit of an outsider from the process, to see how differently that was from every other time we tried to have that conversation. So for me, the real kind of business metric I would apply to that is how quickly we move through things, and that's incredibly important.
How about engineering metrics? Just last bit. Give me some.
Well, actually, for this project in particular, this took probably a month and a half or 2 months, and I think any previous estimate would be like 8 months to a year.
Wow.
For engineering metrics, it's interesting. I was actually going to say, like, the thing that was so interesting to me is it actually allowed me in evaluating my employees to move outside of engineering metrics and sort of being more conscious and explicit about how I thought about my employees. You know, I've had some employees who I thought were slow, and I really racked my brain to kind of come up with a fair evaluation. Do they have more commits? Do they close more tickets more quickly? You know, all those things. And I realized I actually can judge them on my subjective evaluation of their performance, and that's what they need to fix. And so I've actually had a couple of conversations about, like, this is the problem you need to fix. And, you know, and then support that with evidence. Like, if you look at your GitHub commits versus somebody else's, like, it looks worse too, but the problem is not the number. The problem is the perception, and let's talk about why that is.
Thank you. Hi. Really fascinating discussion, especially about letting go of resentment. My question is on meditation and mindfulness. I guess that's also related to letting go of judgment and guilt and all these pent-up feelings. And sometimes it helps to start with a calm and stable presence to look at your thoughts. So is that practice at Wikia? And actually my second question, if I may ask it, are you happier at this company than your previous companies that did have this methodology?
I go for walks when I'm frustrated. That's my method. I don't meditate, but that's my version. I have a pair of walking shoes. I wear high heels. I have a pair of walking shoes at my desk, and when I know I need to get out, I go out and go for a walk.
I don't have anything about meditation itself, but the mindfulness, that's what the triangle is about. The triangle is about being aware of how you're feeling in the moment. Are emotions driving me, or am I centered? Am I going to be able to present or withhold? Am I going to be able to make an agreement in this current state of mind? And if not, if you notice yourself going to one of the corners, then take a pause. You need to get up, take a walk, drink water, come back. So that's the mindfulness part. And that's, I think, critical to being able to just successfully navigate through this.
I guess concretely, no, it's not part of what we're doing. And I think it's really interesting because at various points in my life, I have practiced meditation, and then at other points I haven't. I don't right now. And what was so interesting is this covers a lot of the same territory without, while still being very accessible to anybody who might be like, ooh, like, I don't want to do that, like, hippie stuff. I want to just, like, learn how to be a leader.
And just to that point, what our focus at Wonderworks is what we call mindset matching. So we're matching to the mindset of the leadership team. So we might have missed the boat with the sexual feelings, but we're really looking at what is, because ultimately we don't like working with organizations that we don't get commitment from the top. And so we got the entire leadership team to participate. So that's really part of the selection criteria. And also how we selected what we were going to do was basically a process with the leadership team prior. So everything would get selected. So the way we look at it is a mindfulness practice could be walking meditation, or it could be a seated, cushion meditation. And it's a judgment call, but some organizations, you're really looking at what's going to get less resistance from everyone on the leadership team. And I say everyone in a very specific way, because if I can't look at everyone on the leadership team and they won't commit to the practices, then it's not that it's not a great thing. I would say, meditate, great practices, has made a big impact in my life. But I want the things that are included in the program is that what the leadership team will commit to. Not be perfect every day, but they will commit to. So meditation is not like don't do it, brilliant, fabulous practice. But we will select for each different company the specific practices that will have that, that thing where you'll stand at the front and say, I will commit to share my withholds from everyone on the leadership team. Whether they do every day or not is a different matter. But if you can't have that level of commitment, it's just a nice to have. So I honor meditation and really believe in it. But that's kind of more on Wonderworks and the selection process, just to be honest.
What was the second question?
Are you happy? Are you happier in this company than your previous companies because of this culture?
Full-throated, yes. I'm much happier at this company than I was in my previous company. Although I will mention, so the CEO of Wikia I worked for at the previous company. And it's funny because I run into to colleagues that I actually are still at that previous company. Some that have moved on, and our CEO had a number of nicknames. A few of them not particularly nice nicknames, and I absolutely say like this guy is a kinder, gentler version of the guy that was that we worked for before. But part of it is what Wikia is by its nature, and first of all, I'm going to show of hands. How many people know who Wikia is? Okay, that's,
How many of you Googled Wikia after you signed up to come tonight?
It's incredible. I mean, seriously, as a social force, as what this thing is built up from over the 10 years of existence, it's really a remarkable thing. And so to work at a company that is built on this remarkable thing is really great. I mean, it's very fulfilling to feel like I'm working at something that's meaningful, and that our reach is, we had 190 million people visit our site last month. Man, 190 million is a lot. So I mean, to participate in this thing that reaches and touches and is experienced by so many people is thrilling, frankly. So I dig that. The other thing, and what's our retention rate in like the average?
We said there would be no quizzes.
Okay, sorry. I thought we did that. I've been there almost 4 years as well, and I've worked for a lot of very good companies. There is very little attrition. I mean, there's a lot of people. There are a lot of people that have also been at the company for 7, 8, 9 years. I mean, it's a good place.
Well, and I think I use you as an example sometimes about how different you were when kind of upon arrival to when you started to you got to change your lifestyle, and you got to make a lot of changes to your life that helped you sort of be the person you are today. To be the incredibly happy person you are.
So I don't meditate, and again I get full props, and I know it's very beneficial to me. I have friends who do it. So I ride a bike to the ferry at Larkspur, and then I take the ferry to San Francisco, and I ride my bike from the ferry building to work. That is the most amazing meditation that you do. I mean, to not be in a car and to be in the bay, and then to exercise and be on a bike, incredible. That's my meditation. And yes, it has made me happier.
Thank you. Good.
Yeah, so this is Raghu. I remember about 5-6 years back, my coach asked me, we was checking on, and he said, how do you feel right now? And I was like, why is this relevant? So I can understand, it's not strange to be completely oblivious to your own emotions. And I've been doing a lot of work on mindfulness. So it's a muscle that has to be built. And when you talk about a conscious culture, it seems to be like an organizational emotional intelligence, almost. So my question is, how do you get people on board who may not be that aware, and who may not see the value in it? So how do you work with people who just don't want to be involved in this? How do you get people on board?
You're all looking at
I would say that if somebody who refused to come on board with this wouldn't last very long at Wikia anymore. Our tolerance for BS has gotten, we have very low tolerance for it anymore, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think the answer is I wouldn't force someone, right? When someone is ready, they'll come to it. I think one of the things that really helps is seeing other people, openly practice these things and be conscious leaders and have them be successful. I think that really helps a lot to win over the people who are maybe like,
I think a lot of it is example. By doing it and seeing that it works, I think people are going to subscribe because of that.
And I'm going to ask a follow-up question because I'm not 100% sure of the answer. Were people mandated to go, or was it, what was that? You say what there was?
It's kind of a mixed bag. So the first group was definitely voluntold. They did not have a choice. Sorry. But I sort of tricked them into it by telling them they were just beta testers for what we were going to roll out to everyone else. But the second groups were nomination based. Right? We asked the group, the exec staff to nominate people they felt needed to be there, and I looked for people who were sort of being squeezed in between, their teams below them and the exec staff above them, because I thought they were really important to give the tools to as soon as we possibly could. So I think it's probably maybe we're voluntold. I don't know.
My manager said we're doing this thing, and are you interested in doing this? And I said absolutely. That I'm a keynote, so we learned earlier. So.
Yeah, and we were tricked as well because remember that you're here really doing it, and there was kind of that moment in the room of no, you're not testing this material, you're going to be doing it. So there was an agreement issue that happened.
Yeah, but we didn't know what agreements were in.
I have a follow-up question on that. If it sounds like you have people in Poland, so how do you deal with this kind of complexity and relationship virtually?
Yeah, so we just had our first group of the last version we did. We had people from Poland flying into the class, and I was really interested to see would this translate, right? Would this resonate with them? Would they think we were a bunch of crazy Americans, right? What would their response to this be? And I would say it was overwhelmingly positive. It resonated with them. We have a follow-up group we worked with, and we had our first session with them, and I'm just so excited with the way that they're embracing it and are interested in it and are hungry for it. There, 5 or 6 other people are like, hey, when do I get to go? When do I get to one of these things?
I was going to say, to add on to that, one of our more challenging engineering leads in Poland was part of it, and the follow-up that we've seen from him is like, these are tools I can use, and he's starting to unpack, this is who I am, and this is how I can actually change some of the ways that I behave in these situations and recognize and build more functional relationships. So he's one of the people who I would have thought would be like, oh, this is too airy. Like, he's not somebody that I would have thought would be on board with it, and he is so excited and thrilled and is sharing a lot of success stories about applying the techniques and how much of a difference it's making to him.
I mean, we live in video conference, we live on Slack and email, right? And it's incredibly vital for us to be very clear with each other. I can think of several examples of things through the years that have been miscommunication of agreement. And now that we make our agreements more explicitly, it really helps with that sort of cross-ocean, time zone, departmental communication.
So we've got 2 more. We've got one here and one here just to kind of call the final. If it went fast, I'd go there, but I'm not sure it will. So,
Hi there. In what ways have you changed your hiring and recruiting practices since taking on becoming a conscious culture, being conscious leaders?
Not one answer. So we actually just started this year. We invested in building our own in-house talent team. So that group is really new. And one of the first things they did was build a training program. And they have been kind of making their way through the organization to start training in how we're going to hire from now on. And it wasn't an explicit conversation we had to say, hey, we want to make sure these things match, but it sort of happened, not so much coincidentally, but those things mesh really well. And I think we have found areas where they intersected and have been able to further conversations as we go. But I wouldn't say it's changed us dramatically. We don't poise about the carpet-drama triangle or anything yet.
I would say one thing, maybe it's not directly related to all the material we learned from Underworks, but in John Paul's training for hiring now, he brings up our 5 company values and asks them to talk through them and think about applying those values when we're evaluating job candidates. Are those people going to be the right people to match with those values? And so that was a really interesting kind of introspective way to look at, is this the right person for us?
So this is actually a perfect follow-up. I see that you've really instilled this in your senior leadership or your executives, but how are you introducing conscious culture to entry-level, your everyday employee who might not be living in that space all the time?
So this is our kind of big initiative for this year is taking these learnings and really being able to make them available to everyone in the organization. Up until now, this has been a 4-day program. It's rather intense. It's a big investment of time. And so for us, we're working right now on making these more modular and being able to have more people trained to deliver them, to be able to have everyone in the organization have this information. I've started in small pockets here and there to take people who I think are ready for this and start to walk them through this, and just as opportunity arises, and it's been incredible just to see someone who is not a manager, who is young in their career, who is really struggling for a number of reasons and is sort of stuck, and it's surprising how accessible this is for them when you help them kind of give them these things and they start to package it. It really does resonate. It's not something that is only for senior leadership and people who are, have fancy titles. And there's a lot of incredibly useful things for anybody at any level.
Is the goal for in-house for you to train everyone?
You answered part of my question, which is how long the program is. You said 4 days. But in 4 days, you can't make this kind of transformation. So my question is, how do you follow up and keep up, and what does that look like?
Actually, Rex mentioned this in some of our prep work about how you really have to practice these things. And it's not like you come out and, you don't get a certificate and you're done. It's a lot of work. And so we have groups that meet periodically. Every group has sort of decided how they want to follow up. We had one of the earlier groups had kind of formed partnerships. The later groups formed a mastery group, and that's been incredibly useful because we can revisit things as we need to. We can dive deeper into concepts. So that's been a really useful way to keep us alive and keep us practicing.
I got one more eye at the back here, so I'm going to see where we go, if this is a complex one.
Thank you. Jeff and I are running a small company of 15 people, and they range from millennials to baby boomers and those of us who are stuck in the middle. How would you recommend a company of our size get started with implementing this type of consciousness to our business?
Okay. Well, I was going to say I'll let you, because I think I've got thoughts, but from your perspective it might be more valuable because you lived what you did and what you might do differently.
I would say start early. Like, we were already, 170-ish people when we started this, and we were at a breaking point already, and we're sort of making light of that now, but it was pretty intense at the time, and really understanding that we had to make a change to our own, otherwise to our own detriment. I would say if you're 15 people, that you can have really interesting conversations with everyone in one room. Just a really exciting luxury. So I would take advantage of that.
I guess it's more of that how.
Yeah, so the how, the way I look at it is...
Thank you. Call Anna.
Thank you.
But I would look at just starting small, so starting with something that resonates. So say if somebody said, it's really about feedback. Wow, we struggle giving and receiving feedback. I would start with just that. Or if you went, wow, that whole villain, victim, hero thing was really interesting and that shows up in my life all the time, I would start just there. I think that there takes a lot of commitment to go with a leadership program, but it also can start with one module that can really have agreements. You could just literally start with agreements, because if you've got very kind of, not going to say East Coast, but if you've got more structured people, who really want the hard facts and they want data, start with agreements. Because you want the people to be able to be comfortable in the room. And so mindset matching, there's me mindset matching with Anne, going, oh yeah, there's resonance. Now there's a whole leadership team. So it's not about Anne or I, it's certainly not about me, but you've got to be able to match. And as you can see, different people, different preferences. You've got to get something that can resonate across the whole, is my opinion.
Is there a book or some kind of...
I think to answer your question, even more concretely, call Anna, call some other people, think of this just as any service you need for your company. If you want better snacks, then you could evaluate a bunch of vendors to bring you snacks. If you want better agreements, so part of it is you don't really know what you need, so think about it and work with people who do this kind of work, and then just think about anything else you'd get for your company.
Yeah, and I think resonance is the big thing. So I'm sure there's many people in the room. We love working with people in this space, and it's about getting somebody who really resonates so they can be a partner. And it resonates with your culture. So yes, go look at snack vendors.
I probably interviewed 6 snack vendors when we went through this, not snack vendors. I probably interviewed 6 or 8 different resources for this. And it was really about finding the one that was like, okay, yeah, you get us and you understand what we need. That process, it was, I'll be honest, it was uncomfortable because my role is not someone who's, prone to sharing. So to sit down in a room individually with a bunch of strangers and say, hey, here's what our problem is, was uncomfortable. But by the time you go through that process, you really can unpackage what's going on and be succinct about it. It really does help the process move on.
Thank you.
So really appreciate all of your participation, because I know that's the kind of opening the kimono, and I know all the audience appreciates different examples, because is this real? Give us a practitioner's point of view, and from very different departments and different focuses. So thank you for all taking the time to come this evening. So first of all, I'll give a second shout out to Anjay, because obviously Anjay was a central part of this evening. And in all honesty, the Poland office is phenomenal, because we've worked with people in India, in Pakistan, in other parts of Europe, and really different personalities and cultures. That's what consciousness is about. How can it be, what are the universal things across the board? So thank you, Anjay, and thank you to all of you. So really appreciate your participation. Great questions, lots of participation. I love that. So thank you. So shout out to all of you. And then board members. I know Sarita, you weren't here when everyone stood up. So thank you, Sarita. But thank you all board members, Ben, and Steve, and Sarita, and Margaret, and whoever else is out there. Because now this is the moment you offend somebody. We'll have more events. We've got a website. Steve mentioned, if you want to become a member, there's handouts there, and we're here for any questions. And we kept our agreement and finished on time.
Guys, there's still drinks and foodies outside. Hi.
So I guess that angle is
We've spoken
type of demographic.
I don't know if you get where that's the way